All right. Well, he made his mark as an amateur outside of Fierce Fighting Championship. And on November 8th, he will be making his pro debut live from the Masonic Temple. It is none other than Chris Anderson. Chris, it is such a pleasure to talk to you, man. How you been?
Good, man. Thanks so much for having me on. Appreciate it.
So, one of the big things that I think so many people want to talk to you about is you started things out 2-3. You close out the amateur career on a 4 fight unbeaten streak. Was there anything that changed from the first half of the amateur career to the second half?
I mean, those losses came from some tough opponents. And I mean, one of them being my initial fight or my debut with Artist Lyles, just a tough guy in general. And so some of those losses came from tough guys, but also I was able to start, I guess, putting things together as far as like not just focusing on one aspect of martial arts, but being able to string combinations together, being able to transition from grappling to striking. And so that played a big impact on how training sessions went, what we were working on, and then implementing those things into the cage as well. So,
I would say just off of the tape that I've studied on you, you are very good at mixing up your bag of weapons. So many people at a game who I'm close friends with on the fight team talk about it as well. What do you think was the aspect that maybe you didn't rely on as much early on that you kind of built up as the amateur career went on?
so I wrestled in high school, and so I always felt really comfortable throughout like wrestling and jujitsu stuff. Well, not necessarily jujitsu submission wise, but just having like wrestler pressure. So I always felt comfortable on the ground. I think I relied on that a little bit too much. And so having like a diverse group, especially at Ajima as well, where I've got smaller guys that I can work with on the striking versus like larger guys that you're not able to work that same body technique kind of stuff in. So that's been a big change on the striking side of things as well. But then also just with my coaches dialing in, like, hey, let's work on these specific items, which happen to be striking or transitioning from striking to grappling versus just going to the ground or turning something into like a wrestling match. I mean, people also don't want to see a wrestling match in a fight. I mean, they want to see a fight. So, a scramble is going to happen here and there, but it's been a big focus of mine to not rely on that necessarily, but also be able to stand and strike and showcase that. And so, just working on that a lot has it started to become more of a habit and more technique there.
Man, you have a couple of great things that fly off when you say all that, when you say that answer. Number one being, you talk about being an entertaining fighter. How important in your eyes is it to not only just get a win, maybe by a judge's scorecard, but actually putting on a show for the fans and the audience to build up your name?
I mean, to me, a win is a win in any competition, right? But obviously, we don't want to go out there and like you see some of these like high level fights. I mean, like even just the Merab O'Malley fight where like you want or you're expecting to see some fun stuff, and then it ends up a little bit more boring. Not saying that it's not a smart move there, but so again, the win's the win, right? But trying to rely on like the skills and the stuff that you're working on in practice to win in a way that you're comfortable going out and being like, yes, I not only did I win, but I dominated through that performance. So whether that's every single round dominating or getting the finish, it's important to be interactive there. But I don't know. I've just never been like it doesn't have to be flashy. It just has to be a good performance. If I rely on the skill sets that I have, I know I can have those performances. So
You also mentioned training partners at Agima specifically. I know you also train at 4-7, and that's kind of the primary gym, but you do get a lot of sparring reps with the guys over at Agima. And when I think of people within your weight class, Dante Morales, Brendan Myers, David Kim, there's a litany of others. Do you have a guy that you really like to get reps in with at Agima that really push your limits and maybe you push theirs as well?
yeah, so I mean, like I learned a lot of basics over with 4-7, and I train with like Rad Martinez, Brian Thompson, Arnold Anderton, and Jason and those guys. Rad does morning classes, so I'll go and do my conditioning with him, do my technique with him. But I'm actually primarily training at Ajima now, and so That's an everyday thing. And so when I'm thinking of reps of guys that I'm going with, the guys that you're naming, I mean, I've got Dante, I've got Brennan, David Kim, Zach Hamilton, a handful of others I'll forget. But so I mean, all those guys within that group and that weight class. We've got Joel that visits us pretty often. And so we've got a bunch of guys again around like 145 to 125 that are guys that have competed for titles, guys that hold titles. And so just all those guys in general, whether it's on the ground or whether it's striking, they're pushing me to, to overcome certain situations there or to capitalize different things. And then they're also pushing themselves as well. I mean, they're chasing different titles, or some of them are going pro, or some of them already are pro. So, I mean, we've all got the same goal in mind. So it really helps having a group like that that's keeping high intensity and able to bounce from camp to camp. We've got guys fighting November 16th. We've got guys fighting in December. And so having those guys pushing that whole time helps me as well, because then I've got guys that are pushing the pace.
More of a journalistic question, but who's going to
Yeah.
be in the corner on November 8th?
So I'll have Rad Martinez out of 4-7, and then I'll have Dane out of Ajima with me in the corner.
So one of the big things you mentioned right there was titles, and obviously you were able to pick up a title or two as an amateur as well. What did it mean to you to be able to compete for titles and to be able to have some sort of hardware to show that you're one of the best within the entire area?
I mean, it's cool. It's again, it comes just down to like a win's a win, and there's so much more like out there. I think this is almost bigger than a title fight for me. As far as conditioning, as far as what I'm doing for practices, technique, and all those different things, this is bigger than that for me, just because a amateur title is that it's an amateur title. This is a professional record. This is kind of like all the practice is the amateur career, and now this is kind of the where the show actually starts. So yeah, I think it's definitely nice to have it and be like, hey, you know what, I did what I came to do. I told Steelfist, Kevin and Pat, originally, who I fought with through that promotion, that one day I wanted to have a title, and then I want to defend the title, and then I want to vacate that title and go pro. And so that was my goal from the very beginning, from my very first fight. And so that's when it came out, and I did that. And then now it's on to the next steps.
So was it really just the benchmark of win a title, defend it, then I know I'm ready to go pro, or how was that kind of process for you?
Yeah, I just kind of thought that was kind of how you had to do it. I've seen other people that they have some fights or whatever, amateur fights, and then they are ready to go pro, or they have that feeling like, hey, they're ready to go pro. For me, yeah, it was kind of like, hey, I need to beat guys that are lined up for this title. I need to defend this title to show that I'm capable to do that. And then at that point, that was kind of the benchmark, because looking back through, there was only really a rematch available. And other than that rematch, there wasn't really anything that was holding me to staying at an amateur level.
Obviously you had 9 fights. That's quite a long tenure as an amateur. Is there one specific fight or one specific fighter who really impressed you, or was maybe your toughest test that maybe helped you level up the most over the course of those years?
Gosh, that's tough. I dealt with a couple tough fights. I mean, number one, I mentioned my debut with Artist Lyles out of Extreme Couture. Not only was it a tough fight because he's a tough kid and he's also improved a ton, but just like the whole, this is the very beginning. This is the, go in, feel the pace, go through all that. That was something that I'll remember forever, right? And then other tough fights. Um, um, Christian Cortez, originally when I fought for the belt there, had some good striking. We had some exchanges, and he was quicker on the ground than I really anticipated. And so I'd love to see him continue to compete and develop that way too, because that was a good fight, and that was one that I would have potentially ran back or maybe in the future as a pro. And then there's my last title defense with Dietrich. I think he's a young kid and he's gonna probably go pretty far. He's got a lot of talent and he's got guys around him that are pushing him. So that was another fun one. So
That Dietrich fight was a grappling frenzy. I mean, for someone who's
yeah.
been training as well for years, I thought it was an absolutely entertaining fight. For you, when did you feel, you mentioned the wrestling pedigree that you had kind of walking into the gym. When did jujitsu kind of start to become an A side of your game? Because from the film that I saw, I even texted you and I was like, man, you are very much so just comfortable with grappling in the MMA rule set, if I may say.
Yeah, I mean I trained jujitsu for I mean I've trained since I started competing. To me, watching MMA, there's not really too many MMA fights that don't go without some sort of grappling. And so that kind of needed to be had within the arsenal or within the skill set. And so training that kind of right out of the gate, and being comfortable there. And that was kind of an everyday thing, rolling, drilling, doing different stuff like that, um, between different gyms and just within my own gym as well. But yeah, I guess I've just been somewhat comfortable on the ground, maybe too comfortable at times. But it's definitely come as an advantage when we end up in those exchanges with guys that, again, are my size at 125 pounds. I feel really comfortable with those guys. So,
Do you watch a lot of UFC and do you watch a lot of just MMA at large so that you can kind of identify the stuff that you would like to do when you compete?
yeah, and I try and watch like whether it's, UFC obviously being like such a high level, but also just like, I mean, one championship or like we have other promotions, right, that we'll watch. But I really like to watch guys that are within my weight class, within my weight group, so that way I'm seeing the technique from that side because it's different watching, these like heavyweight guys go in and throw than it is watching, you know, guys that are my size go in and they've got to mix it up in order to find finishes or find different things because not all of us at 125 pounds have knockout power, so it kind of has to be mixed up to where you've got to land 10 shots before you can put somebody away versus just one big one.
Do you have a favorite flyweight or bantamweight that you kind of like to medal your game after?
Oh, I mean, I've got like favorite fights. Um, like there's certain times where it's like, gosh, this guy looks amazing, and then the next fight it's not the same. But like Cody Garbrandt, some of his fights, again, some I say, some of those are so fun to watch, and like, not only is he entertaining, but he's very talented. And then other guys that I can't really imitate because of style, but like Corey Sandhagen's fun to watch. Yeah, TJ Dillashaw was a bunch of fun to watch as well. I wish he wouldn't have had so much shoulder issues so he could continue because I didn't get to watch him as much as I wish I could have, especially now as like the game continues to evolve. It'd be fun to see how that goes. Um, but yeah, current champions are always going to be one to watch. Yeah, I guess anybody 125 to about 145 are really always entertaining fights to me. There's this new guy. I'll have to find his name and I'll text it to you, but I think he's a Brazilian kid and he's a ton of fun. But yeah, I can't think of anybody specifically that really like shines. To me, it's like I've always grown up more wanting to be a part of the sport than necessarily watching it. I'd rather go and kick a ball or throw a ball than turn on the TV and watch a game. So it's kind of the same with the fighting for me. I'd rather be drilling or sparring or working on technique than watching someone else.
Did you grow up playing sports outside of fighting and wrestling and competing in that sense?
Yeah, I actually grew up playing soccer. So from the time I was about 5 years old until what, 21 or so, I played soccer my whole life. I wrestled in between that throughout high school and stuff. But yeah, soccer was it was a big part of my family. Like I have two brothers. We all three played soccer, and so we actually all played for the same clubs and different things like that. So
Did you play for clubs in Utah?
yeah.
I don't know the club scene out here, but that is very interesting. And it brings me to another point. I don't know if you know, I mean, I'm sure you know Talon Carvalho, who's fought for us a billion times and trains all throughout Utah. He was also a big soccer athlete, and he had a very smooth transition from what he was doing athletically to MMA. Where do you think aspects of soccer helped you grow as a fighter?
I think we've talked about this as soccer players, I think, but I think there's like a foot eye coordination and a body. You start to realize like where your body's moving because you're not running through guys and whatnot. It's not like football in that sense, where you can create like power. It's more of a like being aware of where you're at, being aware of where your teammates are at, but also when a ball's coming to you, knowing where you're going to move, and so having that predictive mindset, I think, has helped as far as like the MMA because I'm able to distance myself, and find range that way. And again, I think it comes back to like some sort of foot coordination. I don't know. Maybe I'll have to ask Talon about that as well and see what he thinks. I didn't know that he played soccer, but that's pretty cool.
One of the things I really wanted to ask you about is your brand, Accelerated Athletics. I know that that's something that
Yeah.
you've kind of built up over the last year or so. You've even worked alongside with us a little bit, doing some performance bonuses and things like that. In your mind, what was it that kind of started this brand, and what is it exactly for the people who might not know?
Yeah, I mean, that's a fun question because it's definitely something that I want to continue growing. So, Accelerated Athletics, to me and for now, currently is a program that I'm building. And when I say program, I mean, we develop, I develop sports gear and I source this products from, I mean, all over the world. We have manufacturers in China and Pakistan and Mexico. Um, and some here in the US, depending on what the products are. But the currently what we're doing is we're developing kind of an I don't know, not necessarily like a clientele or customers or whatever, but more like just a public eye by with our gear. So we'll work with athletes, whether amateur, professional, athletes that are looking for sponsorships that might need, you know, maybe instead of like there's other sponsorships that will do certain things for people, maybe instead of like a watch with Rockwell or this and that, we do gear that's kind of more for them to get into the gym if they've got a hard time, or someone rips a pair of gloves and needs something new like that. So for us, starting out, it was athletic gear, athletic wear, revolving around combat sports, so anything and everything there. Future plans for it are to help out with management and promoting athletes. And when I say that, meaning like athletes that are training and active and wanting to continue to grow. We want to help them, especially within Utah, to get that public eye on them. And so if they're willing to also be a part of our brand, and we can work together to do that, that's a huge thing for us. And then eventually transitioning into, once I'm done with the sport in the future, I'd love to still be involved when I'm no longer stepping inside the cage. And so that'll be in a way where I'm helping develop through training sessions or through recovery or through different stuff like that. And so building the brand up currently so that in the future it can be a part of developing athletes is really what it will be.
Why did you start the company in the first place? What was kind of the inspiration behind building something like this that has, big goals in the future?
Yeah, I've always wanted to be a part of sports in a bigger way. Like I've coached soccer. The club that I like played for growing up, I went back and coached youth teams and stuff. And so being a part of MMA, it's the same thing. It's like this would be something that I would really love to coach in the future. My body's not always going to heal the same way that it does right now. And so eventually there will be a time where I step aside, I slow down. But from that point, I can then work with athletes that are young and ready to take the next step or go to the next level, whether that's pro or different, whether that's a PFL or UFC fight or anything like that. We want to be able to work with athletes that are pushing themselves to do that. And again, eventually becoming to the point where we can do athletic development. So whether that's muscle and strength training or helping athletes that have been injured to come back and return from that in a safe spot. So that way, when they go back, they're not going back too early. it's just I've been around sports my whole life, and I've dealt with different injuries, and I've had an awesome team, and awesome doctors and stuff like that to help me through that. Without that, I wouldn't have been able to turn or perform at the level that I was able to. And so because of that, I want it to eventually, when I get to that point, do the same thing. Just, I mean, it's just giving back to the sport. And I think that's really a part of what like martial arts is once you get to the point where you might be done as far as competition, finding ways to continue to help develop the next generation. So that's what it would really be, just development that way. And also like helping out promoters. Yeah, like so I know we've teamed up with Fierce on some different stuff. The goal would really be too as well, like instead of having these guys, like especially local promotions, being able to help with, sponsorships of the company itself, whether that's, helping with, I know they've got to do different stuff for cages or different stuff for gear to make sure it's approved through the commission and whatnot. And so whatever could help out on those sides from the program to help not only our side of things being a part of that, but also it's sourced locally instead of just some random company. So
I know the program is still in its infancy, but has there been any sort of opportunities or some accolades that you guys have reached so far since you've launched this?
yeah, I mean the biggest things for us is some of the athletes that we're working with as far as like just like gear and stuff like that. So we've got a couple guys that fight UFC level that we're in communication with as far as doing different promotional items or promotional shots and stuff for the brand, help get more eyes on it. But also it's been awesome because we've got great feedback. So we work with Billy Goff, and he fights in UFC at welterweight. Also working with Corey Sandhagen, which is a fun one. And he's been out to a GMA, which is kind of what started that out. And so there's a couple other athletes, Scotty Stockman and some other professionals that what we'll do with them is we'll work directly with them. Kent Mafaleo is another one, just a Utah one. I have to throw that out there. Work with them. They'll work with our gear, try it on, and then they'll give us direct feedback on, hey, you know what, I like this. I would like to see, this changed or this changed. And so that way through pattern or stitching or seaming the gloves or the shorts or whatever can be a better fit for the movement of the sport. We don't want to have stuff that's like, it's okay, I wouldn't really wear this because of this. And so whatever that feedback comes from guys that have obviously tried on multiple pairs of gloves throughout their training experience, it's good to have that direct feedback from them. So
I love all that. I think that's extremely cool. And I also like the market research aspect of figuring out what the fighters actually want. That's really, really cool. All right. I'm going to shift outside of that for a little bit and get back to
okay.
the fighting side of things. November 8th, Donovan Wegner. That's a big fight. Obviously, the pro debut. What are you looking forward to in this matchup?
I'm looking forward to like showcasing new skill sets. Not, I guess not necessarily new skill sets that I haven't had the opportunity to show yet. I feel like some of my fights have just been, I don't know if it's the excitement or whatever, that you step into the cage and things don't always go the same as you planned them. But this one, I feel like I've had a good amount of time to prepare for because from my last title defense, I'd have to even look up the date. I can't even remember the date of it. But from that title defense, I vacated like on the mic at that time. And so from then, I've been wanting a pro debut. We've been putting out different feelers everywhere. My gym's been helping me to do that and find stuff to set up. And we've had stuff fall through and then this one come up. And so to me, this one, I don't know much about him. But to me, the biggest thing is to go out and showcase what I've been working on. So things I've been working on between my gyms and by myself, cardio wise and stuff like that. So, um, I guess I'm more excited for this one, like I said earlier, than like title shots, because to me, I feel like I've really dialed in on I guess like a different level than what I was at before. Before it almost felt like an amateur mindset of like, oh, I've got to fight. Cool. This has been more of a business run. And again, I know it's just a debut and whatnot, but this is kind of the start of the where the practice ends, like I said earlier. And so yeah, just getting ready to showcase that stuff is exciting.
How is the demeanor and the intention in the training? You kind of touched on that in that answer, but what is it specifically about this camp that's maybe different? Are you getting to the gym earlier? Are you staying later? Are you, trying to consume as much as you can? Are you watching tape on the guy? Like, what are you doing specifically that's separating the amateur career from the pro debut?
Yeah, so like amateur practices was basically like a practice a day. It'd be about an hour long. Cuts weren't as detailed. I do have a nutritionist uh, that does a whole month long meal prep for me. I wasn't really sticking to that as well. Um, and then now we've transitioned from kind of that mental aspect of not necessarily being like 100%. It was just kind of like, oh, it's amateur, whatever. Um, so like yesterday I had a 7:30 workout, and then I had a 1 o'clock workout, and then I had a 7:30 p.m. workout. And so having three workouts, and then today I've had one workout and I've got another one tonight. Um, so we're doing 2 a days. We're doing the 3 a day stuff is kind of like when I'm doing cardio. But the whole pickup of that is just been huge as far as my cardio. When I go to sparring rounds, when we go and roll and we're going live and whatnot, by pushing myself outside of the gym to do my cardio or do lifts that I wasn't really lifting before. Um, and that was kind of the problem with my last weight cut. I was a poor weight cut, poor planning on my part. I'm actually ahead, maybe even farther ahead of schedule than I wanted to be with the weight right now. But yeah, looking awesome for the weight cut, and so the cardio is on point because of that. Um, and yeah, I guess just taking a little bit more serious. Also, having guys in my corner and at the gym like David Kim, who just fought for Fierce, won the belt and is riding on that right now. Going into his next fight, he's got a lot of motivation, and so he's pushing himself. Um, Brennan, who just fought for the title, also pushing himself to get back. Dante, who's also looking for a title. Zach Hamilton, who again always turns up in the gym. Whenever I text these guys and say, "Hey, do you want to hit mitts? Hey, do you want to roll?" They're always ready to go. So I've got teammates that I guess that's another part of it too. Training at like 4-7, awesome gym, awesome coaches, awesome teammates. Unfortunately, me being a smaller guy, most of my teammates were 155 plus. You've got Matt, you've got Trace, you've got Nino, you've got some other big guys there that awesome guys, but just for my style and my size, just wasn't quite. I wasn't able to push angles because I'd get caught from the outside before I could even cut the angles. I wasn't able to shoot takedowns because they would stuff them. And so working with guys that are my size, or even having guys from Wasatch come in, or different gyms. We've got guys from Tooele that come into Ajima. And so having guys within that weight class and within our size group, it makes a huge difference on how we train. So the training itself has just taken a whole leap beyond doing extra practices, and changing diet, changing everything that way, and just stepping into a new mentality. So,
Well, certainly prepared for the pro debut. We absolutely cannot wait for it. Chris Anderson, thank you so much for the time, man. Any way that people can get in contact with you for supporting your fight, helping out your business, whatever it may be, how can they contact you online?
yeah, easiest way is probably just through like Accelerated Athletics. We're on Instagram. We've got a Google page. Phone numbers, emails are all listed on there. Or I've been posting a couple things on my page as well. I'll probably post this interview. It's nice to have content that can help promote the Fierce channel and have people tune into the Fierce fight. I know this is my first fight with Fierce, and so I want to go out and put on a show so that way they have something later that they can use as a little bit of promotion as well. Because I know right now it's kind of all on me. I've got to be the one to do it. So yeah, anybody that wants to buy tickets, I'm going to be putting the link up on my page, and then just have them jump on there, select fighter, and come out to the Masonic Temple November 8th, and it'll be a ton of fun. So
Cannot wait for it, Chris. Thank you so much, man.
yeah, thanks so much for your time, Blake.